I'm Audrey Mitchell, 32, and I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram when my world shattered. There on my feed were wedding photos of my sister Rachel, a wedding I knew nothing about. My stomach dropped as I swiped through smiling family members I recognized, all celebrating without me. Then I saw it, a photo of her new husband Jake, fingers twisted in her hair, pulling her head back, his smile cold as ice. My phone buzzed, mom calling, probably knowing I'd just discovered the truth. Before I dive into this painful story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever had family drama that blindsided you, and subscribe to join our community of survivors and supporters. Let's get through the tough stuff together. Rachel and I were always more than sisters, we were best friends. Just 3 years apart, we shared clothes, secrets, and dreams growing up in our small Connecticut home. We'd stay up late whispering about boys' career plans and how we'd always be in each other's lives. Even when we fought as siblings do, we couldn't stay mad for long. I still remember how she'd slip apology notes under my door, usually with a candy taped to the paper. "We're Mitchell sisters," she'd say, "nothing comes between us." That all changed when Rachel met Jake Harris 3 years ago at her workplace. She was 26, working as an event coordinator at a downtown hotel. Jake was a client organizing a corporate retreat. The way Rachel described their first meeting sounded like something from a romance movie. He requested her specifically to handle his company's event, sent flowers to thank her for a job well done, then asked her out with a handwritten note. In the beginning, Jake was charm personified when around our family. He'd bring wine for dinner, compliment our mom's cooking, and discuss sports with our dad. He remembered birthdays and asked thoughtful questions about our lives. But even then, something felt off. I'd catch moments where his smile didn't reach his eyes, or how he'd grip Rachel's arm a bit too tightly when she talked to other men. "He's perfect," Rachel would gush during our sister lunches. "He takes care of everything." That was the first red flag. I noticed the way he takes care of everything meant Rachel was making fewer and fewer decisions in her own life. First, it was small things. She stopped wearing certain outfits because Jake thought they were too revealing. She checked her phone constantly, always texting him her whereabouts. Then bigger changes came. She declined promotions that would require more travel, stopped attending girls' nights, and gradually dropped contact with male friends Jake deemed inappropriate. Our family dynamic didn't help matters. Our parents divorced when Rachel was in high school, a messy split that left emotional scars. Dad quickly remarried Diane, a woman 15 years his junior, and built a new family that always made Rachel feel somewhat replaced. Mom remained single, throwing herself into her career as a real estate agent, sometimes missing important events due to work. The divorce left Rachel with abandonment issues she never fully addressed, making her particularly vulnerable to someone like Jake, who promised never to leave. The first time I voiced concerns, we were having lunch at our favorite cafe about 6 months into her relationship. "Don't you think Jake calls a lot during our time together?" I asked gently, after her phone buzzed for the 5th time. "He just misses me," Rachel said, smiling. "He likes knowing I'm safe." As months passed, I witnessed more troubling behavior. Jake surprised Rachel by showing up at a work happy hour I attended with her. While he played it off as romantic, I noticed how he surveyed the room, eyes narrowing at male colleagues. Later that night, I overheard him questioning her about conversations he'd observed. By the 2-year mark, Rachel had moved in with Jake and become nearly unrecognizable. My vibrant, independent sister now constantly sought Jake's approval. She'd decline invitations, saying, "I need to check with Jake first." When she did join family gatherings, she was quieter, less present, often stepping away to take his calls. The breaking point came 6 months ago during a rare sister lunch without Jake. Rachel looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, poorly concealed by makeup. When she reached for her water glass, her sleeve slipped, revealing finger-shaped bruises on her wrist. "What happened to your arm?" I asked, my heart pounding. Oh, I was carrying groceries, and Jake had to grab me quick to stop me from tripping on the stairs, she said too quickly, tugging her sleeve down. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Rachel, I'm worried about you. This relationship doesn't seem healthy. The constant checking in, the way you've stopped seeing friends, these explanations for injuries that don't make sense. Her face hardened instantly. You've never liked Jake. You're just jealous. I found someone who truly loves me. This isn't love, Rach. Love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't isolate you from people who care. You don't understand our relationship, she snapped, gathering her purse. Jake protects me. He keeps me safe in ways you'll never understand. Safe from what? Your friends, your family, your own decisions. I knew this was a mistake, she said, standing up. Jake was right about you. You've always been jealous of anything good in my life. She walked out of the restaurant and our communication dropped to almost nothing after that. The occasional text message, a brief call on our mom's birthday, but the Rachel I knew was slipping away. I never imagined the next significant news about my sister would come through social media showing a wedding I wasn't even told about. The phone call with my mother confirmed my worst fears. As her name flashed on my screen, I took a deep breath before answering. You've seen the photos, Mom said. It wasn't a question. How could you not tell me? My voice cracked. The betrayal felt physical, like a punch to the stomach. Mom sighed heavily. I only found out myself 3 days ago, Audrey. Rachel called last Friday to say she and Jake had gotten married that afternoon at the courthouse. I wasn't invited either. This revelation stunned me into momentary silence. Wait, you weren't there. Who was? Your father and Diane attended. Jake's parents and his brother were there too. A few of Jake's friends served as witnesses. Apparently it was very small and intimate. The bitterness in her voice matched my own feelings. Dad knew and didn't tell me. The betrayal deepened. Richard claimed Rachel sworn him to secrecy. He said she was worried about negativity, ruining her special day. Mom's tone made clear what she thought of that excuse. As we talked, I continued scrolling through the photos that Jake's brother had posted. Tagged images showed additional angles of the ceremony and the small reception afterward at an upscale restaurant. Dad looked uncomfortable but smiling. Diane was beaming. Jake's family, whom I'd only met twice, dominated the small gathering. Have you seen how he's grabbing her in some of these photos? I asked Mom. Yes. Her voice dropped. That's why I refused to attend when she finally told me. I told her I couldn't witness this. We argued terribly. The photos that disturbed me most showed Jake with his hand firmly grasping Rachel's hair at the nape of her neck. In one particularly alarming image, he had pulled her head back slightly while kissing her, his other hand gripping her waist with fingers dug in so tightly her satin dress wrinkled beneath his grasp. Rachel's smile looked plastered on her eyes, showing something that looked more like fear than joy. What made it worse was seeing these images juxtaposed with captions like, "Perfect day for the perfect couple," and "She finally found her Prince Charming" from Jake's friends and family. After hanging up with Mom, I spent hours examining every photo looking for clues in my sister's expression. In some images, when Jake wasn't touching her, Rachel looked almost relaxed. But whenever he was near her, posture changed, shoulders tense, smile tight, eyes vigilant. I couldn't stay silent. I texted Rachel directly. Just saw your wedding photos. I'm hurt and confused why I wasn't told, let alone invited. But more than that, I'm worried about you. The way Jake is grabbing you in these pictures doesn't look right. 20 minutes later, my phone chimed. Sorry you had to find out online. We wanted something small without drama. The pictures are misleading. Jake was just being playful. Not everything is a problem to be solved, Audrey. I'm happier than I've ever been. The formal tone didn't sound like my sister. I tried calling, but she didn't answer. I sent another text. Rachel, please talk to me. I miss you. I'm worried. Just 5 minutes on the phone. Her reply was immediate. Jake and I are celebrating. I'll call next week, maybe. I stared at the message, tears welling in my eyes. The sister who once told me everything now couldn't spare 5 minutes for a phone call. The wedding photos were already gathering attention online. Comments under Jake's brother's post had started questioning the hair-grabbing photo. Is it just me, or does this look concerning? Someone check on the bride. This is not how you treat someone you love. Mixed with congratulatory messages, these concerned comments were creating a storm that would soon escalate beyond anyone's control. Meanwhile, all I could think about was reaching my sister, breaking through whatever wall Jake had built around her, and finding out if she was truly safe. Despite her refusal to talk, I made a decision that night: I wouldn't give up on Rachel. No matter how much she pushed me away, I wouldn't abandon her. With determination hardening inside me, I began planning my next steps to somehow reach my sister before it was too late. The next morning, I drove to my father's house, anger and hurt fueling my resolve. Dad and Diane lived in a sprawling colonial in the suburbs, a home I rarely visited since tensions between Dad and me had grown after Rachel met Jake. He had always been dismissive of my concerns, claiming I was overprotective. When Dad opened the door, his expression immediately turned defensive. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he said, stepping aside to let me in. The living room was immaculate as always. Diane's interior decorating hobby meant everything matched perfectly too. Perfectly, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a furniture showroom than a home. Dad gestured for me to sit. "How could you not tell me about the wedding?" I asked, refusing his offer. "I'm her sister." Dad sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "Rachel specifically asked me not to tell you or your mother. I was honoring her wishes. By attending a wedding you knew would hurt us. It's her life, Audrey, her choices. Jake seems good for her, he's successful, stable. Rachel said she wanted a drama-free wedding. And I'm drama. I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. You and your mother have been against Jake from the start," he replied. Rachel didn't want negativity on her special day. Diane entered from the kitchen carrying a tray with coffee. Her attempt at hospitality felt patronizing given the circumstances. "Audrey, dear," she said in that syrupy voice I'd never warmed to, "sometimes we need to put aside our personal feelings for family harmony. Rachel is a grown woman who can make her own decisions. Have you seen the photos?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the image of Jake gripping Rachel's hair. "Does this look like a healthy relationship to you?" Dad glanced at the phone and shrugged. One moment captured out of context. They were having fun. Fun, Dad, he's literally pulling her head back by her hair. "Young couples are different these days," Diane interjected. "Maybe that's just their way." Their casual dismissal infuriated me. Who else knew? Who else kept this from me? Dad looked uncomfortable. "Your Aunt Linda and Uncle Jim were invited but couldn't make it. The cousins knew too. Rachel asked everyone not to mention it to you or Patricia." The betrayal deepened. My own extended family had conspired to keep me in the dark. People who had watched Rachel and me grow up together had chosen to participate in my exclusion. After leaving Dad's house, I called my cousin Jessica, who had always been close to both Rachel and me. "I'm sorry, Audrey," she said, sounding genuinely remorseful. "I wanted to tell you, but Rachel made us promise. She said Jake was worried you'd cause a scene. And you believed that. When have I ever caused a scene?" I know it didn't make sense to me either. But she seemed so adamant, almost afraid of what would happen if we didn't go along with it. That comment sent chills down my spine. What consequences had Rachel feared if family members didn't comply with these demands? Later that afternoon, I received a call from Beth Reynolds, Rachel's best friend since high school. Beth and I had always gotten along well, though we weren't particularly close. "Audrey, I just saw Rachel's wedding photos online. I had no idea she was even getting married." Beth's voice trembled slightly. "I've been trying to reach her for months, but she rarely responds anymore." "When was the last time you saw her?" I asked. Beth hesitated. "About 4 months ago. We bumped into each other at the grocery store. Jake was with her, and she seemed different, withdrawn. When Jake went to get something from another aisle, Rachel rolled up her sleeve to check her watch, and I saw bruises on her arm. When I asked about them later through text, she claimed she'd fallen during a hike. My stomach nodded. Did you believe her? No, Beth admitted. And the way Jake hovered, never letting her speak to me alone. It was disturbing. After that, my calls went straight to voicemail. She'd occasionally text always brief messages that didn't sound like her. By the end of the day, I'd spoken with several family members and Rachel's former friends. A pattern emerged. Rachel had systematically distanced herself from everyone who might question her relationship with Jake. Those who remained in her life were people who either approved of Jake or were too afraid to voice concerns. Meanwhile, the wedding photos were gaining traction online. Someone had screenshot the hair-grabbing image and shared it on Twitter with the caption, "This is what the beginning of abuse looks like. Check on your friends in relationships like this." The post had thousands of retweets with domestic violence organizations weighing in about warning signs and red flags. As I sat alone in my apartment that night, scrolling through the growing online conversation about my sister's wedding photo, I felt both vindicated and terrified. People were seeing what I'd seen for years. But would this public scrutiny help Rachel, or put her in greater danger? With Jake's controlling nature, how would he react to becoming the subject of negative attention? The viral spread of the photos only strengthened my resolve. If I couldn't reach Rachel through direct communication, perhaps this public spotlight might create an opening. But I needed to tread carefully. Jake would surely blame me for the attention, potentially making Rachel's situation worse. As I finally tried to sleep that night, my phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. It was a single sentence that made my blood run cold. "Stay out of your sister's life if you know what's good for both of you." The threat only confirmed what I already knew. Rachel wasn't just in a controlling relationship, she was in danger. The threatening text message left me shaken but more determined than ever to reach Rachel. After a sleepless night, I decided direct action was necessary. No more texts or calls that could be ignored or intercepted. I needed to see my sister face to face. Rachel and Jake lived in a luxury apartment building downtown, a place I'd visited only twice since they moved in together. Both times, Jake had dominated the conversation, barely allowing Rachel to speak. The doorman recognized me from those visits and nodded as I entered the lobby. "I'm surprising my sister," I explained with a forced smile. He waved me toward the elevator without question. My heart pounded as I approached their door on the 15th floor. Taking a deep breath, I knocked firmly. Footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal Jake, his expression shifting from neutral to hostile when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, blocking the entrance. "I'm here to see my sister," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Rachel's busy. You should have called first." He started to close the door. I wedged my foot in the gap. "Jake, please. I just want to talk to her for 5 minutes." "She doesn't want to talk to you. Respect her wishes for once." His voice had that false calm I'd come to recognize, controlled on the surface, but with anger bubbling underneath. "Jake, who is it?" Rachel's voice called from inside the apartment. "Nobody, babe." "Just someone selling something," he called back, glaring at me. "It's Audrey," I shouted past him. "Rachel, please, I just want to talk." There was silence, then the sound of approaching footsteps. Jake's jaw tightened as Rachel appeared behind him, her expression a mixture of surprise and apprehension. She looked thinner than when I'd last seen her, her collarbones protruding beneath a high-necked blouse despite the warm weather. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, poorly concealed with makeup. "Audrey." She said my name flatly. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you. To talk to you. Can I come in, please?" Jake and Rachel exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Finally, Jake stepped aside with obvious reluctance. Their apartment was spotless, almost sterile in its perfection. No personal photos displayed, no casual clutter of everyday life. Everything was coordinated in shades of gray and white, minimalist and impersonal. You have 10 minutes, Jake said, checking his watch ostentatiously. Rachel needs to prepare dinner soon. Could I speak to my sister alone? I asked. Anything you have to say to Rachel you can say in front of me. We don't have secrets. His arm slid possessively around Rachel's waist. Rachel nodded in agreement, but I noticed how she tensed at his touch. It's fine, Jake should stay. I sat on the edge of their pristine sofa. Rachel, I'm concerned about you, the wedding, finding out through social media. It hurt. We wanted something small, she replied, her voice mechanical. Just immediate family. I am immediate family, I countered. I'm your sister. Jake interjected. Rachel made her wishes clear. She didn't want anyone there who doesn't support our relationship. I kept my eyes on Rachel. Is that true? You didn't want me there. A flicker of something guilt, perhaps, crossed her face before she looked down. You and Mom have never given Jake a chance. That's not true. We've tried. But we've also seen things that worry us. I pulled out my phone. Like this photo from your wedding. I showed her the image now circulating widely online. Jake's hand fisted in her hair, pulling her head back at an uncomfortable angle. People online are concerned, Rachel. They're saying this looks like abuse. Jake's face darkened. This is exactly why you weren't invited. You twist everything into something negative. Rachel's expression hardened. Those photos are being taken completely out of context. Jake was being playful. It was a romantic moment. Romantic, Rachel, look at your own face in this picture. You don't look happy. Oh, so now you're policing my facial expressions. Her voice rose. Not everyone grins like an idiot in every photo. Jake paced behind her, his presence looming. I think your time is up, Audrey. You've said what you came to say. I ignored him. Rachel, I'm worried. First, the secret wedding, now these photos. This isn't like you. You don't know what I'm like anymore, she snapped. You've been too busy judging my choices to actually know me. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is you trying to ruin the happiest day of my life, Rachel's voice cracked. First with your constant criticism and now I know it was you. Me, what are you talking about? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. The viral photos. Jake's company called him in today because those wedding photos are everywhere. They're questioning his character all because someone made that photo go viral. It had to be you. The accusation stunned me. Rachel, I didn't share those photos. I only saw them yesterday, just like everyone else. Liar, Jake interjected, moving closer to me. Who else would have a motive? Who else has been trying to destroy our relationship from day one? I would never do something to hurt Rachel, I insisted. I'm trying to help her. Help me, Rachel laughed bitterly. By humiliating me online. By making my wedding a spectacle for strangers to pick apart. By potentially getting my husband fired. Rachel, please. No, she was fully crying now. Jake was right about you all along. You can't stand to see me happy. You're jealous that I have someone who loves me completely. Jake put his arm around her shoulders, his expression a twisted mixture of concern and satisfaction. It's okay, babe. We'll get through this. We don't need toxic people in our lives. As Rachel leaned into him, Jake shot me a look of triumph that chilled me to the bone. He'd won this round, turning my sister further against me. The confrontation escalated as Jake became increasingly aggressive, stepping toward me with his finger pointed at my face. You need to leave. Now. Before I call security. Just as I was about to respond, a knock came at the door. Jake froze, then composed himself before answering. An older woman stood there, looking concerned. I heard raised voices, she said, eyes darting between us. Everything okay in here? Just a family disagreement, Jake replied smoothly. My sister-in-law was just leaving. The neighbor's presence gave me a momentary opportunity. As Jake spoke with her in the doorway, I quickly approached Rachel. I didn't leak those photos, I whispered urgently. But I am worried about you. If you ever need me anytime, day or night, I slipped a piece of paper with my new cell number into her hand. "This is my new number. Jake doesn't have it." Rachel hesitated, then quickly pocketed the paper. Our eyes met briefly, and in that moment, I glimpsed the sister I used to know, vulnerable, uncertain, and perhaps a little afraid. "I'm fine," she whispered, but her eyes told a different story. Jake turned back from the door, and Rachel immediately stepped away from me. As I gathered my purse to leave, the neighbor gave me a significant look, as if trying to communicate something without words. Walking out of that sterile apartment, I felt both defeated and more certain than ever that Rachel needed help. The second betrayal, her belief that I would deliberately humiliate her, cut deeply. But more concerning was Jake's reaction, how quickly he'd moved to control the narrative and isolate Rachel further. In the elevator down, I couldn't shake the image of Rachel's face, as she whispered, "I'm fine." It was the same expression I'd seen in those wedding photos, a mask covering something much darker underneath. After leaving Rachel's apartment, I sat in my car for nearly an hour trying to process what had happened. The confrontation had gone worse than I'd feared, with Jake manipulating the situation to drive an even deeper wedge between Rachel and me. But the brief moment of connection with my sister and the fact she'd taken my phone number gave me hope. I needed a strategic approach, not emotional reactions. I couldn't help Rachel if Jake succeeded in completely cutting me off. First, I needed information and allies. The next morning, I began methodically reaching out to Rachel's former friends, people she'd grown distant from since meeting Jake. Many of their contact details were still in my phone from happier times when we'd all socialized together. Megan, Rachel's college roommate, agreed to meet for coffee. Once inseparable from my sister, she hadn't spoken to Rachel in over a year. "It started gradually," Megan explained, stirring her latte absently. "First, Rachel would cancel plans last minute. Then she stopped initiating get-togethers entirely. When I did see her, Jake was always there checking her phone, answering questions directed at her." "Did you ever notice anything physical?" I asked, my voice low. Megan hesitated. "Nothing I could prove. But once we were at dinner and Rachel knocked over a glass of wine. It barely splashed Jake's sleeve, but the look he gave her." She shuddered. "I texted her later to check if everything was okay. She replied that Jake was just particular about his clothes. 2 weeks later, she stopped responding to my messages completely." Over the next few days, I spoke with 6 more of Rachel's former friends. Each story followed the same pattern: Jake's increasing control, Rachel's gradual withdrawal, communication eventually ceasing entirely. 2 mentioned seeing concerning physical interactions, Jake gripping Rachel's arm too tightly or speaking to her through clenched teeth when he thought no one was watching. I learned Rachel had quit her job at the hotel 6 months ago. According to a former colleague, Jake had claimed his new position at his company came with enough income that Rachel didn't need to work anymore. The same colleague mentioned Rachel had been up for a promotion before suddenly resigning. Armed with these accounts, I consulted a domestic violence counselor at a local support organization. The woman, a calm, steady-voiced professional named Diane Thompson, listened carefully to everything I'd observed and learned. "First, understand that confrontation often makes these situations worse," she explained. "Abusers typically respond to outside intervention by increasing isolation and control." "So, what can I do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "Create a safety net without challenging the abuser directly. Stay in contact however she allows. Never criticize her choices or her partner to her face. That only pushes her away and toward him. Instead, focus on maintaining connection and being ready when she decides she needs help." Diane provided resources and helped me begin crafting a safety plan, practical steps for when Rachel might be ready to leave. The statistics she shared were sobering. The most dangerous time for domestic violence victims is when they attempt to leave. I couldn't face this alone. That evening, I called my mother. I visited Rachel, I told her, detailing the confrontation. Mom listened silently, then sighed. "I've been doing research since seeing those wedding photos. This situation is It's worse than I feared. We need to help her, Mom. I know. But we need to be smart about it. Jake has already turned her against us. If we push too hard, we could lose access completely. We agreed to coordinate our approach. Mom would occasionally send neutral, loving texts to Rachel, making no mention of Jake or any problems. I would attempt to reconnect through shared memories and interests, avoiding anything that could be perceived as criticism. Our goal was simple but crucial: keep the lines of communication open. Meanwhile, I began discreetly investigating Jake's background. A college friend who worked in human resources helped me conduct a thorough search. What we found disturbed me further. Jake had moved to our city 3 years ago after living in Seattle. Records showed a restraining order filed against him by a woman named Melissa Carpenter, later withdrawn. We found her current contact information through social media. After several days of deliberation, I called her. "I don't know you," Melissa said cautiously after I explained who I was. "I understand your hesitation," I replied. "But my sister Rachel is married to Jake now, and I'm concerned for her safety." A long pause followed. "Is she still with him?" Melissa finally asked, her voice tight. "Yes. They just got married." Another pause. "I'm sorry to hear that." The genuine sadness in her voice confirmed my fears. "Would you be willing to tell me about your experience with him?" Melissa's story chilled me. She and Jake had dated for 18 months. The relationship began wonderfully. Jake was attentive, generous, romantic. But gradually he began controlling her movements, checking her phone, isolating her from friends. When she questioned him, he would gaslight her, claiming she was imagining things or being ungrateful for his protection. "The first time he got physical, he grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised," she said. "He apologized profusely afterward, cried, said it would never happen again." I believed him. But it did happen again, escalating over time. When Melissa finally attempted to leave, Jake became dangerous. He threatened to destroy my career, told me no one would believe me if I spoke out. When I stayed with a friend, he stalked me. That's when I got the restraining order. "But you withdrew it." "He found ways to get to me," she said quietly. "Threatened my family." I was terrified and exhausted. Moving across the country seemed the only way to escape. Before we ended the call, Melissa offered one piece of advice: document everything. Pictures of injuries, threatening texts, witnesses. She'll need evidence when she's ready to leave, because he'll do everything to discredit her. That night, I created a secure online folder. In it, I saved screenshots of the concerning wedding photos, dated notes from my conversations with Rachel's friends, Melissa's account, and details of my visits with Rachel. I set up a separate email address only for communications regarding Rachel's situation and shared access with my mother. We were building a case, gathering resources, creating a safety network. But the most important piece was still missing: Rachel's recognition that she needed help. As I reviewed everything I'd learned, guilt washed over me. How had I missed the signs earlier? Why hadn't I pushed harder when I first noticed concerning behaviors? I'd been complacent, believing Rachel would eventually see Jake's true nature on her own. I couldn't change the past, but I could ensure I was fully prepared for the moment Rachel might reach out. The viral wedding photos had created a dangerous situation with Jake, likely feeling exposed and threatened. His control would likely tighten in response. Time was running out. I could feel it. The wedding photo controversy exploded online over the next week. What started as concerned comments under Jake's brother's post had transformed into a full-blown viral discussion about relationship red flags. The image of Jake gripping Rachel's hair had been shared tens of thousands of times, appearing on multiple social media platforms, with captions like, "This is what control looks like," and "Spot the warning signs." Domestic violence organizations had begun using the image, with Rachel's face blurred, in educational posts about recognizing abuse. News websites ran articles with titles like, "Wedding Photo Sparks," "Domestic Violence Conversation," and "The Disturbing Reality Behind Romantic Poses." While most articles maintained Rachel's anonymity, local sites weren't as careful, and soon people in our community were recognizing her. I monitored the situation with growing anxiety, knowing Jake would be furious about the attention. My fears were confirmed when Mom called one morning, her voice tense. "I just heard from Diane," she said, referring to my stepmother. "Jake's been put on administrative leave pending an investigation." "What kind of investigation?" I asked. "His company has a zero-tolerance policy for domestic violence. Apparently, someone sent the wedding photos to HR with an anonymous note about his history in Seattle." My stomach dropped. "It wasn't me, Mom." "I know, honey. But Rachel won't believe that." She was right. Less than an hour later, my phone rang with Rachel's number. I answered immediately. "Rachel, are you okay?" Her voice came through as a tearful, angry whisper. "How could you do this to us, to Jake?" "Do what, Rachel? I didn't." "Don't lie to me," her voice cracked. "First you make our wedding photo go viral, and now you've attacked Jake's job, his career. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Rachel, I promise I didn't contact Jake's company. I wouldn't even know how." "Stop. Just stop." Her breathing was ragged. "Jake's been put on leave without pay. They're investigating him like he's a criminal. All because you can't accept that I'm happy with someone who isn't controlled by you." The accusation stung. "That's not true. I only want you safe." "Safe," she laughed bitterly. "Jake is the only person who has ever made me feel truly safe and loved. And now you're trying to destroy him, destroy us with these lies." "They're not lies, Rachel. I've spoken to his ex-girlfriend in Seattle. She had a restraining order against him. Did you know that?" Silence followed. Then he told me about Melissa. She was unstable, obsessive. Jake had to move away to escape her harassment. Classic abuser tactics, reversing victim and offender. "That's not what she told me." "You contacted her." Rachel's voice rose in disbelief. "You've been investigating my husband behind my back." "I've been trying to understand what's happening to my sister, who suddenly got married without telling me, and is now defending a man who grabs her by the hair in public. That's it. I'm done." Rachel's tone hardened. "Jake was right all along. You're toxic, Audrey. You can't stand anyone else's happiness." "Rachel, please." "We're moving," she interrupted. "Jake has a job offer in Arizona. We're leaving next week to get away from all this drama you've created." The news hit me like a physical blow. Arizona was across the country, far from family, friends, and any support network Rachel might need. "Rachel, don't do this. Don't let him take you away from everyone who loves you." "The only person who truly loves me is Jake," she replied coldly. "He's standing by me despite everything you've done to destroy his reputation and career. That's real love, Audrey. Not your controlling, judgmental version of it. I'm your sister. I've loved you your whole life. Then act like it. Stay out of my marriage and my life." The call ended abruptly. I sat frozen, phone still pressed to my ear as the reality sank in. Jake was escalating, using the viral incident as justification to completely isolate Rachel. Moving her thousands of miles away would cut the last threads connecting her to potential support. Things deteriorated rapidly after that call. Jake's brother Ryan began posting angry messages about jealous family members, spreading lies. He tagged me directly in several posts, leading to a barrage of hostile messages from Jake's friends and family. Some were merely critical, others contained veiled threats. "Hope you're happy destroying your sister's marriage. People who interfere in relationships get what they deserve. Better watch your back, homewrecker." The harassment affected my work at the advertising agency, where I was an account manager. Clients Googling my name found the controversy. My boss called me into her office to express concern about the online situation affecting our professional reputation. Even my dating life took a hit. The man I'd been seeing for a few months, nothing serious yet but promising, stopped calling after finding the drama surrounding my name online. "I'm not looking for complications," he texted, when I finally asked why he'd gone silent. Through it all, the most painful aspect was Rachel's absolute certainty that I was behind everything. The sister who had once known me better than anyone now viewed me as an enemy. Jake had succeeded in his manipulation, turning her genuine concern into proof of malice. Mom and I spoke daily, trying to formulate a plan before Rachel disappeared to Arizona. We contacted Rachel's old therapist, hoping she might reach out professionally, but she couldn't breach confidentiality by contacting a former client without request. 5 days after Rachel's call, I received a text from an unknown number. "This is your final warning. My brother and his wife are moving on Friday. If you try to contact them again, there will be consequences. Ryan." The threat felt tangible, Ryan's hostility jumping off the screen. I forwarded it to Mom, who insisted I file a police report. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic but frank. "Unless there's a specific threat of violence, there's not much we can do. But it's good to have this documented, especially if things escalate." That evening, alone in my apartment, surrounded by notes and resources I'd gathered to help a sister who wanted nothing to do with me, I felt utterly defeated. I'd tried everything: direct conversation, gathering allies, collecting evidence, and had only succeeded in pushing Rachel further into Jake's control. Now she was leaving, cutting off what little chance I had of reaching her. The separation would be Jake's ultimate victory, the final severing of Rachel's support system. I cried myself to sleep that night, mourning what felt like the loss of my sister. Not to death, but to a slow, insidious force that had consumed her identity and twisted her perceptions until the people who loved her most became enemies in her eyes. Just before dawn, my phone buzzed with a text. Heart pounding, thinking it might be Rachel, I grabbed it from the nightstand. It wasn't Rachel. It was Beth, her old friend. "Just drove past their building. There's a moving truck outside. I think they're leaving early." Jake was accelerating the timeline, perhaps fearing intervention. They weren't waiting until Friday, they were leaving now under cover of darkness, making a clean escape before anyone could interfere. I texted Mom immediately, then threw on clothes and grabbed my keys. I didn't have a plan, didn't know what I could possibly accomplish, but I couldn't let Rachel disappear without trying one last time to reach her. As I rushed to my car, another text came through, this time from Rachel's neighbor, the woman who had interrupted our confrontation. "Something's wrong." I heard screaming from their apartment. Then silence. "Police are on their way." My blood turned to ice as I read the words. The escalation had begun, just as the domestic violence counselor had warned. The most dangerous time was when an abuser felt their control threatened, like when they were publicly exposed, or when their victim might leave. But Rachel wasn't trying to leave Jake. She was leaving with him. Unless something had changed. Unless Rachel had finally seen the truth. I pressed the gas harder, praying I wasn't too late. It was just past midnight when my phone rang, jolting me from fitful sleep. An unknown number flashed on the screen. My heart raced as I answered somehow, knowing this call would change everything. Audrey. The voice was barely recognizable, hoarse, shaky, but unmistakably Rachel's. "Rachel, what's wrong? Where are you?" "Memorial Hospital. Emergency room." Each word seemed to require enormous effort. Could you come?" "I'm on my way." I was already out of bed, grabbing clothes. "Are you okay, is Jake?" "Please just come." "Alone. Don't tell anyone yet." The hospital's emergency room was harshly lit and half full despite the hour. I gave Rachel's name at the desk, and a nurse led me through double doors into the treatment area. The antiseptic smell and beeping monitors heightened my sense of unreality. "She's in treatment room 3, the nurse said quietly. "The doctor just finished with her. Police have been here but left temporarily." Police. The word hung in the air as I approached the room. What had happened? Nothing could have prepared me for the sight of Rachel lying on the hospital bed. My vibrant, beautiful sister was nearly unrecognizable. Her right eye was swollen shut, deep purple bruising spreading across her cheekbone. Her split lip had been sutured. Worst of all were the finger-shaped bruises visible on her throat, a grotesque necklace of violence. Oh, Rachel. Tears sprang to my eyes as I approached the bed, careful not to startle her. Her left eye, the one not swollen shut, tracked my movement. You came. Her voice was a raspy whisper damaged from what I now understood was strangulation. Of course I came. I gently took her hand, noting the splint on 2 fingers. What happened? Where's Jake? Police took him. Each word seemed painful. Neighbor called 911, heard me screaming. Slowly, through labored whispers and long pauses, Rachel revealed what had happened. The viral wedding photos had sent Jake into increasingly frequent rages. The administrative leave from his job had been the tipping point. He'd blamed Rachel for not controlling her family, for embarrassing him publicly. The Arizona job offer had been his idea, a fresh start where no one knew them, where he could rebuild his reputation without the interference of Rachel's family. But as their departure approached, Rachel had begun having doubts. Found my phone today, she whispered. The one he took months ago. Hidden in his desk, started reading messages, saw everything he kept from me. Your texts, Mom's calls. Her good eye filled with tears. Realized he'd been lying. Controlling everything. When Jake caught her with the phone, something in him snapped. The carefully controlled public persona vanished, revealing the monster beneath. The beating had been vicious and calculated. When Rachel managed to scream, he'd begun strangling her. Couldn't breathe, she said, touching her bruised throat. Thought I was dying. Then door burst open, neighbor with building security. Jake ran. Police had found him attempting to drive away and arrested him on the spot. Rachel had been rushed to the hospital with multiple injuries, 2 broken fingers, a concussion, fractured ribs, and the visible facial trauma. Doctors said. Lucky she managed her good eye, meeting mine. Strangulation often fatal. Or brain damage from oxygen loss. I tried to maintain composure to be strong for her, but the magnitude of how close I'd come to losing my sister overwhelmed me. Silent tears streamed down my face as I held her hand. The police want my statement, Rachel continued. Evidence for restraining order, photos of everything. I'm here for whatever you need, I assured her. We'll get through this together. Rachel's expression crumpled. I'm so sorry, Audrey. For believing him over you. For the things I said. Shh, don't apologize. None of this is your fault. I fell down the stairs, she whispered bitterly. That's what I was going to tell everyone. Again. His favorite excuse for my injuries. The confession broke my heart. How many times had she covered for him? How many accidents had been deliberate violence? We sat in silence for a while, the magnitude of the situation settling around us. Eventually, Rachel spoke again, her voice slightly stronger. Stay tonight, please, afraid he'll make bail. Come back. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. And he won't get near you again. The doctor returned shortly after, explaining Rachel's injuries in more detail. The physical wounds would heal, but the psychological trauma would require longer-term care. Rachel would be kept overnight for observation due to the concussion and strangulation injuries, both of which could have delayed complications. When the doctor left, I stepped into the hallway to call our mother. It was nearly 2 a.m., but she answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Audrey, what's happened? The fear in her voice was palpable. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though my voice broke several times. Mom listened in stunned silence. I'm coming now, she said when I finished. Tell Rachel I love her. Tell her she's safe now. Throughout the night, I stayed by Rachel's side, dozing occasionally in the uncomfortable chair, but mostly keeping watch. Each time she stirred or whimpered in her sleep, I was instantly alert, reassuring her of her safety. The night nurse checked regularly, adjusting pain medication and monitoring vitals. Morning brought police officers returning for Rachel's formal statement. They photographed her injuries, recorded her account, and confirmed a temporary restraining order was in place. Jake remained in custody charged with felony, domestic assault, aggravated battery, and attempted strangulation, the most serious of the charges. Shortly after the police left, Jake's attorney arrived at the hospital, attempting to deliver a message from Jake. Security removed him after I alerted hospital staff. An hour later, Jake's mother called Rachel's phone, which I had been keeping charged. The voicemail she left veered between pleading and threatening, claiming Jake was under stress and that Rachel was destroying the family with these accusations. I deleted the message without letting Rachel hear it. Mom arrived mid-morning, her face pale with shock when she saw Rachel's condition. Despite her own distress, she maintained composure, sitting on Rachel's other side and gently stroking her arm, avoiding the IV and monitoring equipment. "I'm here now, sweetheart," she said softly. "We both are. You're not alone anymore." As the day progressed, Rachel's physical discomfort intensified as the initial shock wore off. Each breath caused pain from her fractured ribs. The facial swelling made it difficult to speak or eat. But something else was emerging through the pain, a quiet determination I recognized from the sister I'd known before Jake. Late that afternoon, as Rachel dozed under medication, Mom and I spoke in whispers by the window. "He'll make bail eventually," Mom said. "We need a plan for when she's discharged." "She can stay with me," I offered immediately. "My second bedroom is ready." Mom nodded. "We'll need to collect her essential belongings from the apartment. And legal representation, she'll need a good lawyer." We were mapping out next steps when Rachel's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hello. Is this Rachel Mitchell?" a female voice asked. "This is her sister. Rachel can't come to the phone right now." A pause. "This is Sergeant Rivera from the county jail. I'm calling to inform Miss Mitchell that Jacob Harris has made bail. He was released 20 minutes ago." My blood went cold. "But there's a restraining order." "Yes, and he's been informed that violating it will result in immediate rearrest." I wanted Miss Mitchell to be aware of the situation for her own safety. I thanked the officer and ended the call, turning to Mom with fear evident in my expression. "Jake's out," I said simply. Mom's face hardened with resolve. "Then we move now. I'll stay with Rachel. You go to the apartment with Rachel's key and pack what she needs. Take someone with you in case he shows up there." As I prepared to leave, Rachel stirred awake immediately, sensing the tension in the room. "What's wrong?" she asked, wincing as she tried to sit up. I considered lying, protecting her from more stress, but Rachel deserved the truth. "No more secrets, no more protection through ignorance." "Jake made bail," I told her gently. "But you're safe here. Hospital security is aware and the restraining order is in place." Fear flashed across her battered face, followed by something unexpected: anger. "Get me out of here," she said with sudden urgency. "He knows where I am. He'll come here first." "Rachel, you're still under observation. Please." Her good eye fixed on mine, pleading but determined. "I know him. He'll come. He always comes back." The raw fear in her voice convinced me. I'd spent 3 years watching my sister's autonomy systematically stripped away. I wouldn't dismiss her concerns now when she was finally voicing them. Mom and I exchanged looks. "I'll speak with the doctor," she said, heading for the nurse's station. Left alone with Rachel, I sat beside her, taking her uninjured hand. "We're going to get through this," I promised. "You're not facing him alone ever again." Rachel's fingers tightened around mine. "I should have listened to you," she whispered. "All this time you were trying to help me and I pushed you away." "He isolated you deliberately," I replied. "That's what abusers do. It wasn't your fault." She closed her eye, a tear slipping down her bruised cheek. "I still loved him even after everything." "How broken does that make me?" "Not broken," I assured her. "Human. Love doesn't just disappear even when it's directed at someone who doesn't deserve it." Mom returned with the doctor, who was reluctant but understanding of Rachel's fear. Against medical advice but with prescriptions and detailed care instructions, Rachel was discharged that evening. As we helped her into Mom's car, Rachel kept scanning the hospital parking lot, flinching at every moving shadow. The sister who had once fearlessly led me on childhood adventures, who had stood up to bullies on my behalf, who had confidently pursued her career goals, now cowered in the back seat, terrified of the man she had married. In that moment, I understood completely the devastating impact of domestic violence, how it systematically dismantles not just bodies but identities. The physical wounds would heal with time, but rebuilding Rachel's sense of self and safety would be a much longer journey. As we drove away from the hospital, Rachel pressed her face against the window glass, watching the world outside with wary vigilance. I reached back to take her hand, and she gripped mine tightly like a lifeline. "You're safe now," I said again, willing it to be true. But the haunted look in Rachel's eye told me she wouldn't feel truly safe until Jake was out of her life permanently. And given his history, his rage, and his obsessive control, I feared that day might be far away. The next 3 days passed in a blur of medical appointments, legal consultations, and heightened vigilance. Rachel stayed in my apartment, sleeping in my second bedroom that we quickly converted into a safe space for her recovery. We installed additional locks on the doors and security cameras at my entrance, small measures that provided modest reassurance against the threat Jake represented. Despite the restraining order, Jake had already attempted contact multiple times. He sent flowers to my apartment building with an apology card. He created new email accounts when Rachel blocked his primary address. He enlisted friends to check on Rachel with seemingly innocent messages that always concluded with pleas to work things out and reminders of how good things used to be. Each attempt reinforced what the domestic violence counselor had warned us. The most dangerous period for abuse victims is when they attempt to leave. Jake's initial shock at Rachel's departure was evolving into determined pursuit, his tactics switching between intimidation and manipulation. Meanwhile, we learned that Jake and Rachel's apartment lease was ending in 3 days, the timeline for their planned move to Arizona. This created urgent practical concerns alongside the safety issues. "We need to get your belongings before the lease ends," Mom pointed out during our morning strategy session at my kitchen table. "Otherwise, who knows what Jake will do with your things." Rachel, still moving gingerly with her fractured ribs and healing injuries, looked up from her tea. Her facial bruising had deepened to purple-black, but the swelling had reduced enough that both eyes were now open. "Most of it doesn't matter," she said quietly. "Just some documents, photos from before Jake, and a few personal items. And your clothes, jewelry, electronics," I added. "Things of value you shouldn't have to replace." Rachel's hand trembled slightly as she set down her mug. "He'll be watching the apartment. He knows I'll need to come back eventually." She was right. Jake's previous patterns suggested he would use the apartment as bait, anticipating Rachel would return for her belongings. It presented both a problem and an opportunity. After careful consideration, we developed a plan with input from Rachel's newly hired attorney, the domestic violence support team, and a private security consultant Mom had engaged. Rachel would take a temporary leave of absence from her life to focus on recovery, while I took leave from work to support her. The first priority was safely retrieving her essential belongings from the apartment she had shared with Jake. We chose our timing carefully. Through subtle inquiry via mutual connections, we confirmed Jake had a mandatory meeting with his attorney on Wednesday morning regarding his upcoming arraignment. This gave us a narrow window to access the apartment when he was certain to be elsewhere. Wednesday arrived with a sense of tense anticipation. Mom, Rachel's friend Beth, and I gathered at my apartment reviewing the plan one final time. Rachel sat on the couch wearing dark sunglasses to cover her still visible bruising, her body language betraying her anxiety. "You don't have to come," I reminded her. "Beth and I can get your things using your list." Rachel shook her head. "I need to do this. Closure. Besides, there are things I might remember seeing that aren't on the list." The security consultant, Mom, had hired a former police officer named Gabriel arrived to accompany us. His calm professional demeanor provided reassurance as he outlined safety protocols and contingency plans. If he appears, you leave immediately, Gabriel instructed. No confrontation, no discussion. I'll handle any interaction while you get to safety. With 2 cars, Gabriel's and mine, we made our way to Rachel and Jake's apartment building. The security guard recognized Rachel and waved us through, without question, unaware of the situation's complexity. Gabriel positioned himself strategically near the elevator, while the 3 of us proceeded to the 15th floor. Rachel's hand shook as she inserted her key. The apartment looked different than during my confrontation with Jake. Moving boxes were stacked in the living room, some already sealed and labeled for the Arizona relocation. The sight visibly rattled Rachel. "Let's work quickly," Beth suggested, gently. "I'll take the bathroom items on your list." I headed for the bedroom closet, while Rachel moved toward a small desk in the corner that contained her personal documents. We worked methodically, filling bags and suitcases with Rachel's clothes, toiletries, jewelry, and personal mementos. As Rachel sorted through desk drawers, she suddenly froze her hand, hovering over an open drawer. "Rachel," I approached cautiously. "What is it?" She lifted out a small notebook, then another. "My journals," she whispered. "The ones Jake told me were lost in our last move. He said the movers must have thrown them away accidentally." I looked over her shoulder at the collection of 5 notebooks spanning years of Rachel's life, including the first years with Jake. He had hidden them deliberately, I realized, probably after reading their contents and discovering Rachel's early misgivings about his behavior. "There's more," Rachel said, voice tight as she reached deeper into the drawer. She withdrew a stack of mail birthday cards from Mom, Christmas greetings from cousins, the sympathy card I'd sent when her cat died last year. Correspondence Jake had intercepted and hidden. The discovery unleashed something in Rachel, a slow-building fury that straightened her posture despite her physical pain. "He stole my words," she said, clutching the journals. "My connections. My doubts. Everything that was mine alone." As we continued searching, more disturbing finds emerged. A folder contained printed screenshots of Rachel's text messages, email logs, showing Jake had been monitoring her communications for years, even a list of friends with notes about which ones were problematic influences that needed to be managed out of Rachel's life. Each discovery strengthened Rachel's resolve. The scared, uncertain woman who had entered the apartment was transforming before my eyes, reclaiming pieces of herself with each item we recovered. We had been working for about 40 minutes when my phone buzzed with a text from Gabriel, possible subject: vehicle approaching parking garage. Expedite and prepare for departure. My heart rate spiked. We need to finish up. Jake might be coming. Beth and I moved faster, grabbing the remaining items on Rachel's list. Rachel herself stood transfixed by the open drawer, reading a page from one of her recovered journals. "Rachel, we need to go," I urged, touching her arm. She looked up, expression suddenly clear and determined. "I'm ready." We had just finished loading the last bag and were heading for the door when the elevator chimed in the hallway. Through the peephole, I saw Jake step out, his attorney nowhere in sight. The meeting must have ended early, or more likely Jake had never gone, anticipating our plan. "He's here," I whispered, backing away from the door. "Gabriel is downstairs." Beth immediately called Gabriel while I texted Mom, who was waiting in a cafe nearby. Rachel stood absolutely still, her face pale beneath the bruising. "The service elevator," she said suddenly. "At the other end of the hall. Staff use it. It was our only option." Gathering our bags, we moved quietly to the back door of the apartment that connected to the kitchen. I eased it open, checking the hallway. Clear. We slipped out, just as a loud knock came at the front door, followed by Jake's voice. "Rachel, I know you're in there. Your car is downstairs." He was bluffing. Rachel's car was at my apartment, but the attempt sent chills through me. We hurried down the hallway toward the service elevator, our footsteps muffled by the carpeted floor. Behind us, the knocking grew more insistent. "Rachel, open the door. We need to talk." We reached the service elevator, Beth repeatedly pressing the call button while I kept watch. Rachel stood between us, clutching her journals against her chest like a shield. The elevator seemed to take forever each passing second, increasing the risk of discovery. Jake's voice grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of a key in the lock. He still had access to the apartment. The door would open any moment. Finally, the service elevator arrived with a soft chime. We rushed inside, pressing the button for the parking garage level, where Gabriel waited. Just as the doors began to close, Jake appeared at the end of the hallway, having entered the apartment and discovered our escape route. "Rachel!" he shouted, running toward us. The elevator doors closed just in time, cutting off the sight of his enraged face. Rachel leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, her injured ribs clearly causing pain with each inhale. "He'll take the main elevator down," she said. "He'll try to cut us off in the garage." Beth continued updating Gabriel by phone as we descended. He confirmed he was positioned near the service elevator exit, ready to intercept Jake if necessary. When we reached the garage level, Gabriel was waiting as promised. He ushered us quickly toward his vehicle, keeping himself between us and the main elevator bank. "My car is just over there," I said, pointing to where I'd parked. "Leave it for now," Gabriel advised. "We'll get it later. Priority is getting you all out safely." We had almost reached Gabriel's SUV when the main elevator opened across the garage. Jake emerged, spotted us immediately, and began running in our direction. "Get in the vehicle," Gabriel directed, calmly placing himself in Jake's path. Rachel, Beth and I scrambled into the SUV with our bags, Gabriel's training evident as he maintained position without escalating the confrontation. Jake reached us just as Gabriel was moving to the driver's side. "Rachel," Jake called out, his tone suddenly shifting from anger to pleading. "Baby, please. This is all a misunderstanding. Look what they're doing, turning you against me, taking you away from our home." Rachel stared straight ahead, not engaging. Jake attempted to move closer to the vehicle, but Gabriel blocked his path. "Sir, there's a restraining order in place. I need you to maintain distance." "Who the hell are you, Jake?" snarled, his facade of reasonableness instantly evaporating. "This is between me and my wife. I'm a licensed security professional, and you're currently in violation of a court order." Gabriel responded evenly. "Police have been notified." Jake's face contorted with rage as he realized his usual tactics weren't working. He suddenly lunged toward the SUV, reaching for the door handle near Rachel. "You think you can leave me?" he shouted. "After everything I've done for you, you're nothing without me, nothing." Gabriel intercepted him, physically restraining Jake with practiced efficiency. At that moment, the garage security team arrived, alerted by Gabriel's earlier call. Jake continued struggling and shouting as the security officers assisted in restraining him. "Rachel, don't do this." Jake's voice echoed through the garage as Gabriel quickly entered the driver's seat and started the engine. "You'll come back, you always come back." As we drove away, I glanced at Rachel. Silent tears streamed down her face, but her expression wasn't fear or grief, it was resolve tinged with something like relief. She clutched her recovered journals tighter. "He's wrong," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I'm not nothing without him. I'm everything I was before him, and I'll be more after." It was the first glimmer of the sister I remembered, strong, self-assured, clear-eyed. In that moment, despite the danger and trauma still fresh around us, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years regarding Rachel Hope. The police were waiting at my apartment, having been called by both Gabriel and the building security team. Jake had violated the restraining order in front of multiple witnesses, providing grounds for his immediate rearrest. As we gave our statements, Rachel spoke with a steadiness I hadn't expected, recounting the confrontation without flinching. That evening, as Beth and Mom helped organize Rachel's rescued belongings in my spare bedroom, Rachel sat at my kitchen table, one of her journals open before her. She looked up as I placed a cup of tea near her hand. I wrote about the first time he frightened me, she said. 2 months after we started dating. He punched a wall when I was 20 minutes late meeting him. She turned a page. I made excuses for him even then in my own private thoughts. Told myself it showed how much he cared. I sat beside her, not speaking, giving her space to process. 3 years, she continued. 3 years of my life, gradually shrinking, becoming smaller, quieter, more afraid. She closed the journal. I'm done being afraid, Audrey. Done being small. The police called an hour later to confirm Jake had been rearrested for violating the restraining order. He would remain in custody until his arraignment on both the original assault charges and the new violation. The prosecutor was pushing for denial of bail given the escalation of risk. As we prepared for bed that night, Rachel paused in the doorway of the guest room. Thank you, she said simply. For not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself. I hugged her carefully, mindful of her injuries. Mitchell sisters, I reminded her. Nothing comes between us. She smiled faintly, the first genuine smile I'd seen since before the wedding photos appeared online. Nothing, she agreed. Not even me. That night, for the first time since finding those wedding photos, I slept peacefully, knowing my sister was safe under my roof, beginning the long journey back to herself. 3 months after that harrowing day at the apartment, Rachel sat across from me at my kitchen table, highlighting sections of a legal document. The morning sunlight caught her hair, now cut into a short, stylish bob, her first act of reclaiming her appearance after leaving Jake. The physical bruises had healed, though she still occasionally winced when turning too quickly, her ribs not quite back to normal. My attorney thinks the divorce will be finalized within 6 weeks, she said, capping the highlighter. Jake's criminal case has complicated things in our favor. His lawyer is pushing him to agree to my terms, rather than drag things out while he's facing felony charges. I placed a mug of coffee in front of her. That's good news, right? Rachel nodded the motion, confident and decisive, so different from the hesitant, permission-seeking gestures that had characterized her interactions during her time with Jake. The best news is, the judge granted the permanent restraining order. 5 years renewable if needed. She took a sip of coffee, then added more quietly, though we both know a restraining order is just paper. It doesn't stop someone determined to cause harm. This fear, realistic but manageable, was part of Rachel's new normal. The domestic violence support group she attended twice weekly emphasized practical safety alongside emotional recovery. Rachel had learned to balance vigilance with living freely, refusing to let fear imprison her as effectively as Jake once had. Living with me had given Rachel a safe space to begin healing, but we both recognized it was a temporary arrangement. She needed to rebuild independence, gradually reclaiming her ability to make decisions and trust her judgment. I have an apartment viewing this afternoon, she mentioned, scrolling through her phone calendar, a phone that was now secured with biometric authentication and safety apps. It's in that building near the park, the one with 24-hour security and cameras. Want me to come with you? I offered. Rachel considered this, then shook her head. I think I want to do this one alone. Test how it feels to make this decision for myself. She glanced up with a small smile. Though I'll definitely want your opinion before signing anything. These small steps toward autonomy marked Rachel's progress, each decision made independently, a victory against Jake's conditioning. Her therapist, Dr. Levine, specialized in trauma recovery and domestic violence, helping Rachel understand how Jake had systematically isolated and controlled her. We talked about love bombing in yesterday's session, Rachel shared, referring to her twice-weekly therapy appointments. How Jake's excessive attention and gifts at the beginning weren't romance but the first stage of control. Dr. Levine says my childhood issues with Dad made me vulnerable to someone like Jake. Our father had been another complicated aspect of Rachel's recovery. Initially defensive about his role in enabling Jake, Dad had gradually come to recognize his failures, both in protecting Rachel and in understanding the dynamics of abuse. "Your father called again yesterday," Mom mentioned when she stopped by later that morning, bringing groceries and her unwaveringly practical support. Since Rachel's hospitalization, Mom had been a constant presence, coordinating with lawyers, accompanying Rachel to medical appointments, and helping navigate the bureaucratic maze of restraining orders and victim services. Rachel nodded. "We're meeting for coffee next week. Just a short visit." "Are you sure you're ready?" Mom asked, concern evident in her voice. "Dr. Levine thinks it's important I practice setting boundaries with him," Rachel explained. "Dad wants to sweep everything under the rug, pretend Jake was just a bad apple, rather than confronting the patterns that made him ignore the warning signs." The conversation highlighted how Rachel's healing journey had affected our entire family system. Mom had joined a support group for families of domestic violence survivors, learning how to provide appropriate support without overstepping. I had begun therapy myself, processing the secondary trauma and guilt I carried for not intervening sooner. Even Dad, initially resistant to examining his role, had started counseling after Rachel made clear their relationship could only continue if he acknowledged his part in enabling the abuse. His new wife Diane, after witnessing Rachel's injuries firsthand, had become surprisingly supportive, volunteering at a domestic violence shelter and educating herself about abuser tactics. Jake's criminal case proceeded alongside these healing efforts. The district attorney had compiled a strong case, including Rachel's medical records, police reports, witness statements from neighbors, and the building security team, and evidence of prior controlling behavior. Jake had initially rejected plea offers, maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. "My victim impact statement is almost finished," Rachel mentioned as we prepared lunch together, a simple task that had become a comforting ritual during our months as roommates. "The prosecutor says it may not matter if Jake takes a last-minute plea deal, but I needed to write it regardless. For myself." "Can I read it?" I asked. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "Tonight maybe. It's still hard to share some of this." That evening, after Rachel returned from her apartment viewing with cautious optimism about the space, she handed me several handwritten pages. "It's probably different from what the court expects," she said, sitting beside me on the couch. "Less about the physical injuries, more about the years leading up to them." I read slowly, tears forming, as Rachel's clear, unflinching prose detailed not just the final violent attack, but the gradual erosion of her personhood over 3 years with Jake. She described how he'd isolated her from friends and family, monitored her communications, criticized her appearance and decisions, and systematically convinced her that his controlling behavior was love. Most powerful was her conclusion: "The physical injuries Jake inflicted have healed, but I continue recovering from the invisible damage, the destruction of my self-trust, the fear of my own judgment, the hesitation before making even simple decisions without approval. These psychological injuries are the true violence of domestic abuse. They persist long after bruises fade, requiring years of dedicated work to overcome. I am doing that work daily, reclaiming the person I was before Jake, and discovering the stronger person emerging after him." Jake did not snap or lose control the night he attacked me. His violence was the culmination of years of calculated control, the logical endpoint of a relationship built on dominance rather than respect. The only difference between that night and the 3 years preceding it was the visibility of the harm. The intent to own and control me had been present from the beginning, disguised as love and protection. I asked the court to consider not just the physical attack, but the sustained psychological campaign that preceded it. A campaign designed to isolate me from support, undermine my independence, and create dependency on my abuser. This too is violence, though it leaves no visible marks. When I finished reading, I looked up to find Rachel watching me steadily. "It's powerful," I said, handing back the pages. "Truthful in a way people need to hear. I'm sharing it with the support group next week," she replied. "Several women are still struggling with whether what they experienced counts as abuse, because their partners never hit them." She tucked the statement into a folder. The bruises almost made it easier, in some ways, incontrovertible evidence that something was wrong. Many women never get that clarity. Rachel's growing involvement with advocacy work had become an important part of her healing journey. What began as attending a support group for her own recovery had expanded to volunteering on a crisis hotline, speaking at awareness events, and eventually planning to train as a peer counselor once she felt ready. Beth called earlier, Rachel mentioned as we prepared for bed. She's organizing that fundraiser for the women's shelter next month. Wants to know if we'll help. Of course, I agreed immediately. Beth had become a crucial member of Rachel's support network, our shared experience during the apartment rescue, creating a bond that transcended their previous friendship. She'd been particularly helpful in rebuilding Rachel's social connections, gradually introducing her to new friends who understood trauma and respected boundaries. As spring turned to summer, Rachel's progress accelerated. She secured the apartment near the park, beginning the process of creating a new home that reflected her tastes and preferences, rather than Jake's controlling aesthetic. She enrolled in courses to update her event planning certification, preparing to re-enter the workforce on her own terms. Jake's case concluded with a plea agreement guilty to felony domestic assault and violation of a restraining order, in exchange for dropped charges of attempted strangulation. He received a 3-year sentence with 18 months suspended, meaning he would serve at least 18 months in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. The sentence included mandatory completion of a batterer intervention program and continued enforcement of the restraining order. The news brought mixed emotions. Relief that Jake would face consequences, satisfaction that the system had worked in this case, but also recognition of how rare such outcomes were for domestic violence survivors. Many victims never saw their abusers face any repercussions at all. On the day Rachel moved into her new apartment, family and friends gathered to help Mom organizing the kitchen with characteristic efficiency, Beth arranging plants and photos, Dad on his best behavior assembling furniture under Diane's supervision. I watched my sister direct the process, clearly communicating her preferences, without the constant second-guessing that had characterized her behavior with Jake. As the others departed that evening, Rachel and I shared a final cup of tea in her new space. Family photos decorated the walls, childhood pictures, recent images of Rachel with Mom and me, but also new photos from her expanding circle of friends and support groups. Conspicuously absent were any images from her time with Jake. I kept one, she admitted, opening a drawer to reveal a small box. Inside was a single wedding photo, not the viral image of Jake grabbing her hair, but a quiet moment captured before the ceremony. Rachel alone staring at her reflection, her expression a complex mixture of uncertainty and resignation. To remember what it feels like when something's wrong but you've convinced yourself it's right. She closed the drawer firmly. A reminder, not a keepsake. We sat in comfortable silence, surveying the apartment that represented so much more than just a living space. It was tangible proof of Rachel's reclaimed independence. "Did I tell you I'm starting a blog?" she asked suddenly. Anonymous, of course. About recognizing the warning signs about how abuse escalates so gradually you don't see it happening. "That sounds perfect for you," I replied, genuinely impressed by her continued growth. "Your journal entries from the early days with Jake could help so many women recognize similar patterns." Rachel nodded. "That's what Dr. Levine said. Those journals he hid might end up being the most important evidence I have, not for court but for myself. Proof that I did see the warning signs, even if I rationalized them away." As I prepared to leave, Rachel stopped me at the door, pulling me into a careful hug. "Thank you," she said simply. "For seeing what I couldn't. For not giving up when I pushed you away. For being there when I was ready to leave." I hugged her back, feeling the strength returning to her frame. "That's what sisters do." "No," she replied, stepping back to meet my gaze directly. "It's what love actually looks like, not possession, not control, not isolation disguised as protection. Real love means speaking truth even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult. standing in the doorway of her new home, surrounded by symbols of her rebuilding life. My sister looked both familiar and new. The Rachel I'd always known, strengthened by surviving what had nearly destroyed her. As I drove home to my now quiet apartment, I reflected on our journey over the past year, from the shock of discovering Rachel's secret wedding, to the horror of her hospitalization, to the slow, determined work of recovery. The path hadn't been linear, with setbacks and difficult days interspersed among the victories. But the direction was clear: forward, toward healing, toward wholeness. That night, I posted a final update in the private online support group I joined for siblings of domestic violence survivors. My sister sleeps in her own apartment tonight for the first time since leaving her abuser. The journey isn't over, recovery is ongoing, vigilance still necessary. But today marks a milestone worth celebrating. For those still waiting for your loved ones to recognize their situation, don't give up. Keep the door open. Be ready when they're ready. The person you knew is still there beneath the fear and control. And when they find their way back to themselves, it's worth every painful moment of the wait. What was your experience with recognizing warning signs in relationships, either your own or someone close to you? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between speaking up or staying silent when concerned about a loved one? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others who might be facing similar situations. Remember, sometimes the most important thing we can do for someone we love is simply to remain present even when they push us away. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to speak difficult truths when necessary, and the wisdom to recognize when love requires action rather than silence.